Good evening. I'm John Calian. I work at Deutsche Telekom Innovation Laboratories, where I lead a team of about 300 researchers, developers, and product people. We focus on blockchain. I guess that's why I'm here tonight, but also a lot of artificial intelligence amongst some other things. Background is mostly startups, building software, and mountain biking.
Oh no, now I need to have a fun fact at the end there. So I'm Daniel Hawthorne. I'm the co-founder and CTO of Datawallet. What Datawallet does is we give users, average internet consumers, tools to take back their data from the different silos that it's created on the internet and actually have some control and some agency of this resource that is currently kind of being used behind their back. My background is mostly academic, besides working in startups. I did research in cognitive science and machine learning, specifically probabilistic programming. So I'm really excited for all the data science and all the cool ethical applications that can be built on an ethical data ecosystem.
So William Tunstall-Pedo. I'm an entrepreneur, AI person. I most notably had a 10-year entrepreneurial adventure that started by being the CEO and founder of a small tech startup focused around understanding natural language, automatic question answering. Eventually built a voice assistant which was acquired by Amazon, and I then had a role, senior product role building Amazon Alexa. So that was like a 10-year journey for me. Several years inside Amazon, 7 years as a venture capital-backed tech startup founder, CEO. I now work with startups very heavily. So I work for an incubator in Canada called the Creative Destruction Lab. I'm a fellow there. So I see literally hundreds of startups, mostly machine learning, AI. But this year I'm actually in the blockchain stream as well. So I'm seeing quite a few blockchain startups as well. So I'm very interested in startups. I'm very interested in deep tech. I see my skills at the intersection of product, technology, and business. I'm a computer scientist originally, but I consider myself to be much more of a product person now, even though I'm sort of deeply technical too.
My name's Ian Forrester. I'm the CEO and co-founder of VR Playhouse. We're an immersive content studio in Los Angeles that specializes in real-time content for enterprise and entertainment. We work with a lot of independent creators on the entertainment side. We work with several large companies on the enterprise side. Prior to entering VR, I was in the arts and humanities producing real-world immersive experiences, and then decided to take my whole game digital in about 2014.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Visa, like the credit card. I'm Finnish mathematician and I work as a research scientist in the cybersecurity team of VTT Technical Research Center of Finland. My background is in cryptography and authentication, and I'm also doing my PhD about the security of different hashing functions that the blockchains use. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Valery Vavilov. I'm originally from Latvia. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Bitfury Group. Bitfury is the main infrastructure provider for the Bitcoin public blockchain, as well as we have a platform for private blockchain. You can build different kind of applications and blockchainize different systems on top of this private blockchain. Also, we are one of the we are investing a lot and contributing a lot into open source protocol called Lightning Network. And one more vertical what we launched recently is the Crystal blockchain. It's an analytic tool to track Bitcoin transactions and to make banks, insurance companies, and investment funds compliant in crypto. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. So as you see here, we've got AI, blockchain, cryptographers, mining companies, entrepreneurs, technologists, AR, VR experts, and it's quite a wide berth. So I'm going to start with kind of a broad question. So when we think about security and the awesome amounts of data that are being produced exponentially at this point, whose responsibility is it to secure? Is it the entrepreneurs and the enterprises of the world? Is it the government? Is it consumers, the end users? can you tell me from your perspective, as we have the convergence around blockchain and AI and cloud and AR, VR, and all the other buzzwords that people use of emerging tech coming together, whose responsibility is it?
Well, from a telecommunications standpoint, I don't think we'll leave it to chance. We ourselves will be working hard to secure things, right?
Yeah. So I think that if you're going to leave it up to external organizations, you're really rolling the dice. I think the only way to actually be sure that's going to happen is to have a degree of personal responsibility. However, with the current data ecosystem, it's very difficult. So there's a big gap in both education and tools to allow people to start taking control of this resource. I mean, it is now sitting in all of these different silos, and we get this drip, drip, drip of information coming in. Experian has lost all of our social security numbers. Facebook has leaked some data to people who maybe we wouldn't have liked if it was transparent. All of these things are happening because it's in a resource external to us. So the end user, whether it's a responsibility or not, if they want to have the assurances, they're going to have to proactively take control. It's not going to be handed to them.
So, I mean, the obvious answer is that the primary responsibility is with the organisation or entity that controls the data. So, I mean, the government is clearly not responsible if it doesn't controlling the data, even though they may have a regulatory role. If an individual has trusted a third party with their data, clearly the individual's ability to control it once it's been shared is limited. But you know, at the end of the day, what's more important is that the data is secure. So I guess it's what works that matters most, and it's not a simple question as to just who's responsible.
I think regrettably the answer is it's with the individual and the consumer to protect their own data. It is. You know, I'll caveat that by saying it's a bit unreasonable to expect that from every single person. So I think that really as developers, we have to be consumer advocates and provide tools for that data to be protected within whatever ecosystem we're creating. But ultimately, it will rely on the consumer and you know, them sort of educating themselves and closing the knowledge gap. But as developers, there's a lot that we can do to help them.
So can I just stop you there for 1 second? Let's get a little controversial now. So when you think about empowerment, it's great. We say, individuals should be securing their own data, should secure their own digital wallets. But what have we seen? People lose their keys. People lose all manner of things and actually are pretty terrible at management. So how do we safeguard that?
Well, as I said, it is in fact an unreasonable expectation, but regrettably, that is the current model. That is the model under which we live. You know, you can't expect the big platforms to protect your data these days, and that's just the world that we live in. So, you know, I think that as developers, we have a responsibility to be consumer advocates. However, there's a lot of profit to be made in that delta between what the developers know and what the users know. And, you know, unfortunately, that too often gets exploited at the expense of the end user.
But we've all given up our rights to our data willingly. You know, we started like 10 years ago. And we could all choose to stop, right? I mean, every single one of us could just stop using Facebook tomorrow. I mean, I primarily use Facebook to share pictures with my friends and family around the world. Now I use WhatsApp, which is also owned by Facebook. But maybe tomorrow I'm going to use Wire, okay? Which is a EU-based company, by the way. But it's all our own choice, right? And with the social networks, I think where it gets tough, though, is at least in the U.S., someone was mentioning social security numbers, right? There's dominant companies that hold our personal information, and you can't get it out of there. So I don't know how to tackle that unless the market brings us a solution that's different, right?
The one thing I want to add to that is what you already touched upon is the crucial thing here is data mobility, right? I mean, people are so locked into Facebook now. You could leave, and everyone got annoyed at Facebook and said, I'm leaving Facebook. But where are you going? And there's a reason why there's nowhere to go. It's that there is this entrenched monopoly of data that makes it such that viable alternatives can't happen. The actual internet marketplace is completely hamstrung because there is no data mobility. If you could take control and power up the next competitor of Facebook with your contacts, with all the historical information, so there wasn't this barrier to entry, it would be a much more productive and viable system.
This is coming. Like, we have one project in our lab, decentralized, like Facebook or Twitter, basically. So it's coming. It's just who's going to get out there first and market it properly.
So
Wait, hold on. Deutsche Telekom is building this?
Yeah, we have one of our projects, we call it Talkie, short for walkie-talkie. And all of your data is stored wherever you choose to put your data. And then you have a URL pointer sitting in a blockchain, and then you control it. And then you could monetize it. So we'll be showing that off a little bit later this year somewhere.
That's fantastic.
So I have to say I disagree with my fellow panelists on this. I think the percentage of the planet, there's like 7 billion people on the planet. The percentage that are like really sophisticated about tools and their own personal data and where it is and how it's being used are absolutely minuscule. I mean, we may be overrepresented in this room heavily by people that think about this and care about this. The vast majority of people want to take photos on their phone. They don't want those photos being shared across the world. They want to have private conversations with their friends. They don't want those private conversations to be read by people they don't want them to be read. They're using tools that are built by third parties, and they trust those third parties to look after their data. Their primary responsibility has got to be with the third parties that are controlling people's personal data. That's got to be the primary place where it happens. If you can empower individuals to make better choices, then great, but that's just not a solution that you're going to get every single person in the planet adopting and thinking about hard and making difficult choices to fix.
Yeah, education is very important. Education is very important because a lot of people just don't understand what is cybersecurity. They just this is a very important point. But second, everyone mentioned here the choice. The people should have a choice. Yeah, because some now, if we look at the systems of this world, some systems are designed, but we don't really have a choice. But I think it's important to design the system so that we have this choice. If we want to keep the data and store it, guard it by ourselves, we should have this choice. If we want to trust the third party, we should have the choice and give the data to a third party to process it and store. Yeah.
Yes, I agree that of course the company is the main responsible of the data, but it should be possible for the user to get control of the data. And of course the security have to be made so easily to use that even my mother can use it. So that's very important.
That leads me to the next question. Val, thanks for teeing it up. Around if we're going to redesign systems to be secure and allow empowerment of the individual to actually control their data, what does that look like? And are the blockchains today the fit for purpose architecture?
I don't think the blockchain architecture matters so much. It's more about the user experience. Giving people a really good user experience is the most important thing, and then marketing, right? I mean, all the blockchain networks we work with, they should all perform well if everybody acts accordingly. But we think a lot about like Airbnb and Uber, right? It's the experience. It's easy. You open your phone, you hit a couple of buttons, and a car pulls up. You make it that easy for things, and you'll get customers, and people will shift over.
I think that the danger is between the data and the identity. So being able to look at online behavior, or being able to look at data about user behavior, and then being able to then target down to a single corporeal being, that's where it gets, where we get some really dystopian possibilities. Things like what's happening in China right now with their social credit system, where investigative journalists can't even buy a train ticket to leave town. They're effectively under house arrest, and this is This is because you can take this data and target it to a single person. And what we need is a gateway that the user controls, and where they understand the consequences and they understand the implications, and they can say, yes, I will allow access to this data set of mine to be able to get to me because I receive some benefit for it. Because the data itself is really useful at scale. And I think that like it would be a shame to see that resource go away, but the ability to attach it to a single natural born person creates basically the ability to run, targeted psyops on that person through their web browser, which I don't think any of us want.
Look, I'll tell you, the most interesting news I read this week was I think maybe the first case of, Google being brought to court through the GDPR here in the EU. I mean, if anything's going to force change, it's going to be the GDPR. And the court case is coming up. I think the litigation is going to decide what is your right to be forgotten and what isn't, right? Right now, the lawyers we confer with say that a hash of your personal data sitting as a transaction in a blockchain is personal. It kind of confounds me a little bit. I'd really need somebody to explain this to me, not a lawyer. But this is where we're at today, right? So I think the litigation is going to help too. Imagine if once a day Google is sued for 80 million euros. What happens? That will break open, something kind of big. The dam will break then.
I think very important also to create this very simple rule. If we have such issues, what we cannot even understand what is written, and we need lawyers to understand this, something broken, yeah, and all systems should be super clear and super simple, 0, 0, 1, yeah. If system is too complicated, it's always will be broken or something will go wrong. So all systems, I think it's important to design as simple as possible. And you always can create a complicated system in a simple way. You just split it in simple systems.
So the GDPR discussion is actually very important. There have been several sessions actually during Davos Week where we've had that discussion, and the GBBC sits on the European Blockchain Observatory group, and we've actually put out a GDPR report. And unfortunately, you are right, there's actually debate and there's areas of gray, and we shall see how we come out on the other end. But I want to talk about, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Australia and what they did at the end of the year. We were actually in Australia when this happened, but they passed a law that basically allows for backdoor allowances, which from a technologist standpoint is a major issue if they can the government can backdoor in and say they have access to your encrypted systems, because they can subpoena you and say they need that information for terrorism reasons or whatever reason it might be. And again, we've had that issue with Apple and a few other companies. What's your view on governments basically saying that they need access to your secure systems? And this is going to come to a head more and more, guys, so I do want some views on this.
So I think there's I think the fact that a backdoor has been built in is trust damaging for the product, and for so the argument that it prevents terrorism, clearly there may be individuals who are active in terrorism, and so governments feel very strongly about this. But if you have a backdoor, you've basically created a security breach in this system that's open to humans. And you've also, I think you've also creating a situation where there's quite a big dent in the trust that people will have in that system by the fact that backdoor is there. And people don't trust government in most countries, or a lot of people don't. So, they don't know necessarily, they're not necessarily familiar with the details of the court system and the process and the evidence that's needed to get this. If that backdoor's there, people will imagine that it's being abused. So I think all of those are quite big issues that would have to be dealt with.
Quantum computing proof encryption. I'm not a computer scientist, but I'm assuming somebody might. Anybody in the room want to answer my question on that? Is there such a thing as quantum computing proof encryption? I mean, If we go that direction, who's going to break into it? And we would say, second to that, no servers will reside in Australia. I don't know, right? You build an app, you put a VPN on it, and you completely avoid anything physical in Australia, and then Australia loses. I don't know.
But then are you not able to do business in Australia if you don't have the backdoor programmed in? I think it's more of a policy issue than a technology issue.
It's like whack-a-mole then, you know?
Right.
Like they're going to keep ahead with regulation, or they're always going to do catch-up. Governments tend to be playing catch-up, right?
So I think there's a real ethical debate here. It's easy to kind of gloss over this with something, but when you put it into stark terms of like in the real world, recently there was a case in Britain where a mob hitman was one of the ways he was convicted was evidence from his Garmin watch when he was on the Scout, right? So that data was used in the court case against him, and there's an ethical dilemma here. Well, is it more ethical to use that data to convict a killer, or is it more ethical to ignore the data and possibly let this person walk? And I think that's kind of the real question, right? Is like, it's yet another tool for criminal justice enforcement, and then it goes back to, do you trust your government, and do you trust the criminal justice institutions to, act fairly?
Yeah, I think this really, really bad idea. It totally makes cryptography untrustworthy. And then every country will soon want to have their own backdoors. And then we have multiple software with multiple backdoors, and the hackers will really love this.
Visa, I thank you for that, because here's the thing. I think all the tech community is being very complacent about these laws being passed. It's one country, then another country, and then another country. You say it's whack-a-mole, but I'm telling you that I think we're looking at,
Make money.
Sure.
So do you just stop operating in a country, or do you bend to the rules?
Most global companies will look to have to comply. Otherwise,
No, I understand, but it's also about ethics versus law, right? When do you apply your corporate ethics versus follow a law? I think it's a tough one.
No, and I think we're going to have this debate throughout this year and into next, and it's not resolved anytime soon, but it's something the tech community, from a consensus standpoint, needs to actually get around and actually make sure that its voice is being heard, because the Australian law got passed in December with there was dissent onshore, but the reality is most people don't even realize this law has been passed in the rest of the world, right? So again, I think awareness and education is a key thing. So we're going to switch gears. We're going to talk about sort of the way, if you were to look at the way academic institutions have developed, and this is really for Visa, you basically are, you're studying to be a PhD, and also you work with basically the Finnish government-funded VTT organization, do a lot of R&D. When you think about things that worry you from a security standpoint as a cryptographer, what areas do you think about, or do you advise the Finnish government on things to be aware of or things to think about? Can you give us some insight into how your organization works?
No, well, Finland is a small country, so we don't have that kind of resources as America or Australia. So it's very important to use crypto without backdoors, for example. And for example, we do things together with Finnish Defense Forces, and it's really important to choose right kind of crypto that, for example, other countries cannot hack them. And also, with blockchain cryptography is a really good idea, because if we encrypt all the data that we put in the blockchain, then it's much easier to protect the privacy. For example, now the Finnish Immigrant Office divides money to the asylum seekers by this blockchain-based program, so that the people are there totally anonymously, but the government can't see that how they are using the money.
Are you doing this now?
Yes, it has been going a couple of years.
Oh, wow, okay.
So.
Great, thanks. Any other views from more of academic circles? I don't know, actually, the rest of you are actually practitioners.
We have lots of academics. Can you say the question again?
No, I was looking to see if there are any more academics, but you guys are all entrepreneurs. Never mind. From an entrepreneur standpoint, when you think about security vulnerabilities, what worries you the most from your area of the world? What issues?
On the last question. So there are lots of very high-level concerns with different kind of blockchain platforms and what are the vectors of attack and like what percentage do you need. And when it comes down to it, I mean, if you go and you talk to a security expert, their first thing they're going to do is look at the human element. So I'm kind of repeating myself here, but it's the last mile of security systems that is the most important. It's that end user interaction. And for blockchains to actually be helpful and productive in a broader context, it's going to require a lot of really smart UI and user outreach in order to do that last mile, to make public key cryptography, the kind of basis of all this, something that people can manage. Because their social security numbers are already out there. There are third parties that they should have been should have been trusting in order to safeguard that have failed, right? Their private keys are the next generation of this, and they need to take control of this. And we, as entrepreneurs, need to help them in that process.
Yeah, one big problem now are the passwords, because people use very weak passwords, and the computers are better and better, and the password cannot protect anything soon. They are totally useless, and
So
then we want to
passwords
use
are useless.
yes, and that's why we want to use more biometric data. But then it's also really important to encrypt this biometric data and use homomorphic encryption. That then we can do calculations with encrypted data, because we don't want to spread our biometric data in the internet also. So encryption and biometric data is the future. Hopefully we are going to get rid of passwords. That's what I hope.
Okay, listen up, people. Visa wants to get rid of all passwords. I do too, actually. It's terrible.
So I think bugs are a ongoing security concern. Every time you update a bit of software, there is the potential for there to be a bug that's a security vulnerability, and there is no way of guaranteeing that isn't going to be the case. And if you're trusting a blockchain, and there is an update to the software, there is a finite chance that that last software update has introduced some vulnerability that could be catastrophic, and that kind of thing. That's a concern that is maybe not talked about enough.
So in my world, I see a whole slew of new data points coming that will be very profitable for companies like mine, but are also very troubling for consumers. So, they'll be profitable from us on the enterprise side, because we'll be able to create training programs that then deliver real-time, robust biometric feedback about how a certain subject is doing, and be able to adjust the experience in real time. That's very exciting. Never before possible until this technology. At the same time, from the consumer side, the same technology is going to be embedded into consumer headsets. So you have HTC announced eye tracking headsets are coming this year. I'm not sure if the Oculus is also eye tracking. I think it might be the new Quest. And these headsets, and we've had eye tracking headsets, but this is the first time they're really being deployed at scale by large companies. And eye tracking, it can read pupillary dilation. It can deliver. It can tell whether you're experiencing involuntary sexual arousal. It can tell whether or not you're lying, and then you pair that eye movement with whatever it's seeing inside the screen, and you're tagging objects, and it's just a whole new set of data that is revealing not just conscious preferences and conscious input, but subconscious preferences and subconscious input. And it's still very early days, but I think it's important that we don't see that weaponized against consumers.
You raise an excellent point, and I think let's move into sort of discussion around the evolution of AI. I think there's a wide spectrum of views about where we end up, with this evolution and how quickly it's going to happen. But as AI advances and we garner more and more of this kind of data, do you have any thoughts for how we might actually secure this in a way where, again, it is not weaponized against consumers or individuals? Are there any ideas?
The most straightforward way is for the user to keep it locally and only permission it conscientiously. I mean, and this is also an answer of what should we do about backdoors? I mean, backdoors are a question for these third parties. If you really trust third parties, it opens a whole wealth of complexity. To the extent that you can empower the user to keep their data locally, that's the ideal situation.
I think at its heart, it's about the data being used in a way that benefits the customer rather than benefiting the business. And I think customers are often, if they're getting products that are helping them by showing their data, and that data isn't being used in a way that doesn't hurt them, I think that's most of the battle. So maybe there's a role for regulation there. Maybe there's also it's a lot of it's about the good faith of the business as well. So it's the culture of the business, focusing on benefiting the business's customers rather than focusing on benefiting their bottom line.
Yeah, how do we incentivize users to take ownership of their data, right? We're incentivized to use Facebook because it's free. And there's a long T's and C's, and no one in this room has read all the T's and C's of Facebook, I guarantee it.
Are there any lawyers in the room?
There's no way. Or Google Maps or whatever you're using. We don't read through it. We trade off our security and our privacy for free services, right? So which one of these guys is going to create a company to change the paradigm on incentivization? That's where you're going to get the consumers to change their habits, maybe store it locally. But we've also convinced people to use clouds for the last 10 years. So there's how many billions invested in cloud technology. So we're up against it, But are we all going to carry around USB sticks again? Plug it into a phone, encrypt some data, shoot it. It's a lot of work. So how do you make it really easy? Back to my comment about user experiences.
Yeah, one important thing is to identify the data. So it would be really nice if we had like global system for how to give identifiers to data. And of course, we can divide the data to smaller pieces and gain identification to every piece. Then it's possible to follow or track where the data ends up. And then you can, of course, see the metadata about the data that where has been used before. And then the user could possibly then track his data after a couple of years and see what's going on there.
Okay, so I want to open it up for any questions that people might have. I think this affects us all, and yet I think the majority of people are pretty complacent about where their data is or goes. I mean, it's out there, but do you really have a good understanding of how to manage your data? I mean, there's no easy tools right now. So anyway, question.
Question would be about data for the consumer, the final consumer, because I'm not an expert of blockchain. And I really try to set my mind as the final consumer to sit here and listen to you. And like we say, the gentleman said that the challenge we have that we have when we go to the final consumer, we don't realize that he doesn't or she doesn't realize what is the worth of their data. They just register, they put their information. And is it not too late for us here at our age? Don't we have to educate the 12, 13 years old teenagers on the value of data? And I really think that I think we have to start there, because in the next 5-6 years, when all what we are doing here is going to have roots and come up, it will become some story of the teenagers, the 12, 13 years old today. And I think we are not working in that direction today. We keep talking between experts about all these things, but we have I'm personally worried that we will always be in the same position because we're not working with the guys who will be using the information. And this is where I think maybe you have some answer to this.
So that's exactly what we're doing at Datawallet. We've taken on that challenge, which is to go the final mile and to build a product that can actually reach out and, in a very user-friendly way, give people the tools to get back control of their data, bring it all into one place, and to start getting opportunities to monetize it, to personalize the internet for themselves. And I mean, it's a big technological hurdle, but it's also a big educational hurdle, right? And there's also, there's very interesting and different views on privacy across cultures, across ages. So it's a very multifaceted PR campaign that has to happen. But it's one that I think a lot of us are super interested in pursuing, and it's super important for getting the next stage of an ethical data economy.
I just think closing that knowledge gap, if you've ever, Google has this way of triangulating your Gmail to form like really crazy insights. If anybody's interested, talk to me after. I can send you like a sample
Ian's really good at instilling fear. So if you really want to be scared tonight and have nightmares, talk to him. Really.
Thanks, I guess. But it's not just like sort of triangulating your incoming email based on like what you're purchasing from Amazon. It sends you an email to your Gmail. Okay, then it's looking at a flight you booked, and so it's sending that, and it's actually triangulating that data behind the scenes. And this is something that like until it was shown to me, and then it was shown to me, and I was like, of course they're doing this, but it never occurred to me because I was sort of thinking, oh well, my Amazon data is with Amazon, my Gmail data is with Gmail. But it's, there actually is a lot of cross-pollination. So I think that it really starts with education. It also, the real value of what we're giving up, and this has been said before, and it might be a little indelicate, but at this point we're giving up land for beads, and when it comes to data, and it's something that like we need to address. We're late already. We're late already in addressing it.
Okay, there's a question over here.
Hello, my name is Anthony. I'm a cybersecurity expert. I have a question to the panel that might be worth discussing since we were talking about governmental backdoors from Australia, you mentioned. If there would be a backdoor put in from the government, how long would you think it would take for evil-minded criminals to find that backdoor and exploit that country's citizens? Wouldn't it be a major flaw to actually do that?
I think 1 day maximum it will be the major flaw. Because if government can do it, everyone else can do it as well.
Exactly. The community is very curious, and if they know there's a backdoor, well, it's cryptography. They will try to find it. So I would suggest not to do that. Thank you very much.
Okay. I think we're going to wrap things up. So if anyone has any questions, go to these guys directly. You got some pretty amazing talent here. So final thoughts, less than a minute. Give me your thoughts on, we've talked about how we need to change incentives. And just give me a quick view about how we change incentives. And I know you've given us a little bit of a view, but just tell us in the short term, is it tokenization? Is it paying people to basically stop giving away their data for free? But what can we do? What can we actually do with people in the room who have some influence and power and companies? What are we going to do?
I don't have a good answer. I think free is pretty good. So we gotta think of a way to beat free, How do we get somebody to change a social media app when it's not free? Because somebody asked, what's your data worth? I don't know, maybe somebody in the room knows, but I think with Facebook, it's like $300 a year. So let's just call it $1 a day. Are you going to sell your data for $1 a day? Every day you're going to make a decision like, that company can have my email address and my age, and I get 50 cents. Like, that's a lot of effort to do it every time. So that's one way people are thinking about, but I'm really curious myself. I don't have any great ideas on who's going to change that incentivization model.
I think we should switch our mindset from competition to collaboration. Because if we look how it is happening in our world, we are competing between each other, and competition is war. We are spending too much energy to do this, but there are so much to do in this world, so much to fix, so many inefficiencies. And I believe if everyone in this group and the humanity will start to collaborate, we will start to solve those issues and inefficiencies much, 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 much faster instead of competing with each other.
Universal basic income. I think if that was implemented, you get more people to do things for free too, right?
It's one of the options.
It's one of them, right?
So money's king, and you can't beat free. So this is a problem that we're obviously wrestling with every day. How do we make it incentivize it so it's worth the user to do the efforts, even though we make it easy to build this thing and have it work for them? So money is the easy one. The one thing that I have been, I'm usually a little cynical about how things work, and easy is king usually. However, the one thing that has been surprisingly motivating for people is curiosity and the insights. Also, the current data ecosystem is so complex, and they know so much about you. It's a little self-exploration journey. Once you sift through and once you have all your data together, it's amazing what they've built, and it's amazing what's there. And it's actually surprisingly motivating for people to be able to see this thing, see what Facebook thinks about them, see what advertising keywords are associated with them. That actually has gotten us pretty far. So that's an interesting thing. Just that's not the silver bullet, but it's one thing to put in the mix. And I think there's a lot of other low-hanging fruits that once you have this thing, you'll uncover.
I don't think there's a single answer. I think one piece is world-class information security standards. So regulation. There's so much regulation about how data's used, but there probably should be some regulation about what world-class best practice is as far as information security is concerned, and that's used heavily as well as part of the mix. It's definitely not the whole solution, but it's just a small part of it.
Yeah, as we talked before, so educating people would be one of the main things that we really need to teach people and to make it a habit to think about your data. And then, of course, the applications have to be so easy that you don't have to do everything automatically, for example, that the automatically learns what data do you want to share and so on. So it kind of makes your profile that what kind of data you want to publish and not, so you don't have to make decision every day, but it's based on your history.
I think strong institutions, nonprofits, and NGOs, combined with creating a fair exchange of value in the marketplace. A dollar a day might not be a lot to any of us, but in some parts of the world that do have Facebook, there are people living on less than that. So, that could be a real economic opportunity for somebody in some part of the world.
Well, yeah, I was just thinking about cigarettes, right? Like in America, everybody stopped smoking cigarettes for the most part, but it was because of lawsuits, right? And I was thinking, cigarette packs have like diseased lungs on them or like dead babies, and people still. No, I don't think so. They still buy cigarette packs with diseased lungs on them, like all the time. But the tobacco companies got sued and moved their business elsewhere. Anyway, just back to my point that lawsuits against social media because of GDPR miscompliance could be the catalyst, and someone's going to take advantage.
Last word, I think if we're talking about collaboration, the perfect tool for this is tokenized economy. And I truly believe that if once we will learn how to pack our businesses into tokenized economies, we will be able to launch any business without any competition, because everyone who will participate in this micro tokenized economy will win.
Val, you're such the diplomat and collaborator. Thank you. Look, I think we're at the cusp of real debate here. I don't think we have any real answers in terms of where we're going to end up, but we've got to turn this model upside down. It's not good enough. It's not fit for purpose. And I'll just give one credit to everyone who's been on the panel. Thank you very much. But I want to actually point out Ian and I were at South by Southwest. And I don't even know how this happened, but we were speaking on a panel about data privacy. And Ian pointed out that Cambridge Analytica was a company to look at because they were doing some dodgy things around data analytics. Next day, I think it was, or 2 days later, the Facebook news broke, and Ian looked like a rock star. It was amazing. You ended up in the Austin paper, right? Yeah. Anyway, look, we were laughing about data privacy, but I think we should take this very seriously. I think there are paradigm shifts happening. And as individuals here who are technologists, entrepreneurs, we're building the next generation models. We really need to think about how we protect and empower people individually. So with that, thank you very much. And please give a hand to the panel here.